All right, we're back with more of Talk of the Neighborhoods. I'm Joe Heisler, your host. In this second half, we'll shift gears and shift parties as well to the Republican Party. Joining me tonight, two people who are working vigorously to change the complexion of the state Republican Party. Of course, this year there's been an unprecedented effort to kind of expand the scope, the reach of the state GOP as it enters the critical election season, especially the gubernatorial race. I'm pleased to have joining me from the Republican State Committee, Rachel Kemp, representative of the 2nd Suffolk District. I'm really getting this down. And from the Urban Prosperity Political Action Committee, its executive director, Robert Fortes, joins us as well. Nice to have you both here, Robert.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. Rachel,
My
as always,
pleasure.
I love having you here. Well, what prompted this outreach? I know, Rachel, from your past appearances here, you are indefatigable when it comes to working on behalf of the Republican Party and its candidates, but what kind of kicked this off, set this in motion?
Well, I think that when the Republicans really took a look at where they had been historically, there became a resurgence. It's not something that's new. The Republican Party represented people of color way back when. You know, when they talk about the Party of Lincoln, they really meant that. And Republicans were of color up until the 1960s. And then there was a fatal error, and there was the feeling that the Republicans did not support the civil rights movement, and they've spent a lot of time trying to recover. So now that we've recognized what the mistake was, now we're really voicing that message and crafting the message so that it can be heard again, that Republicans really are supportive of the communities of color. You know, we want to bring social upward mobility. We want to bring wealth creation, not only just jobs, but also entrepreneurship. And in order to do both of those things effectively, there has to be limited government. So the message is social upward mobility, wealth creation, and limited but effective government.
And none of that precludes civil rights either.
Absolutely
for those
not.
That are, I know you've had some events here lately. What's been the reaction, Robert?
I think it's been a positive reaction. I think one of the ways to go about doing this type of outreach is you have to show up. You have to go out into the communities where people live, where the party has not in recent history, as Rachel has just stated, the party has a deeper history of activity in communities of color in urban areas, but recently it has not. So showing up in those areas is to begin the conversation, to let people get to know you, is very key to doing the outreach.
Well, of course, the recent history, and you know, some of this is national elections, but and indeed, part of the credit given for Barack Obama's election and re-election was the support he enjoyed in the community of color. Now, granted, he's a person of color himself, so you know, I guess no one should be surprised by that, but. How do you kind of break? There is some recent history of Democrats having kind of a strangled hold on that part of the electorate. How do you break through? What was the reaction when you were at these events? I know you had. I think you had Charlie Baker there, or at least
We had a rolling rally.
Yeah.
One of the best attended rolling rallies across the state, and it culminated the day before our convention. So yes, we had Charlie Baker there, but more importantly, we had the Latino community. We had the Haitian American community. We had the African American community. Everyone who is representative of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts was in that room. And that's what made it work. Now, it's not only, as Robert said, showing up and talking to the community. It's also showing the community that it's possible to be a Republican and get on the ballot. And we've done that. Most recently, I'm very happy to announce that we have an actual candidate running for state rep, certified, on the ballot, is getting ready to really have an engaging campaign. That's what you have to do. You have to bring people who are reflective of the demographic in order to carry the message and to say it in a way that makes sense to everyone in the room.
Do you have, I mean, kind of given that history though, do you have a hard time convincing whether it's candidates or, I'm kind of curious of the reaction. You know, it's not quite, you know, but, you know, this in Boston, and let's face it, the history here, the Democrats have done very well, extremely well, and although you can't pinpoint it exactly, they seem to do very well in the community of color as well. So,
But again, we're carrying that message: economic development, education, you know, school choice, to make sure that your child is not trapped in some lower economic tier because they didn't have the education to take them forward. So school choice has become a big issue.
Very big issue. I think one of the best ways to start the conversation and to have people stop and really think about it is to talk about how monopolies in business aren't good for the consumer. Monopolies in politics aren't good for the consumer. When you have one party that is able to go into certain communities and have all those votes in one basket, it's just not good for that community, as opposed to two parties competing for those votes.
well, and as you talk about that, and of course, you know, it isn't so much about social issues per se, but more about economic issues. Does that seem to be kind of striking a chord? Can you see it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you talk about how well the state is doing as a whole, in terms of employment or unemployment, however you'd like to measure it, you go into these communities and you're looking at double-digit unemployment. And why is that? Lack of skills. People have forgotten the resources that are located in these communities. You know, there's a very simple equation that will tell you, you know, people in this zip code can perform this kind of work without any additional training. And someone has to begin to look at matching the people with the opportunities and putting them to work. We have community colleges. The community colleges can then take the same workforce and make them even better workers. Community colleges become the entry point for the biotech industry. And we should be participating in that industry. So having the medical centers just walking distance from Roxbury Community College, and the college being centrally located, is an opportunity that we should be taking advantage of in order to attract more businesses to the community so people can wake up and go to work.
Well, you know, and I think, in all fairness, when you start talking about those issues, and of course, they've rolled out a number of, you know, new partnership, new board at RCC, and that's been kind of an ongoing issue of how that's being handled. But the fact of the matter is, sometimes do you feel like all of that gets lost because people kind of get caught up in, you know, what's going on in national politics, and I not to you and I have talked about the Tea Party before, and
we weren't even going to bring up the Tea Party.
Yeah.
Today we were going to say that all politics is local. It's what happens at the local level that affects your life. And that's really where we are. You know,
and I know, you know, that, you know, part of the beauty, well, hopefully all parties, is they accept all comers, and you do have some very conservative elements in your party as well, including, I understand, one of the candidates for governor. But do just generally speaking, when you're reaching out to people, do they kind of get lost in that fog of kind of the national Republican politics? Because
happen.
when you go to other states, the Republican Party is much more conservative and conservative on, not always, but generally speaking, more conservative, and
Well,
especially on social issues.
right,
And I'm
but
wondering if that makes your job tougher.
Back in late February, we had the good fortune here in Massachusetts to have a visit from a gentleman by the name of K. Carl Smith. And K. Carl Smith is the founder of something called the Frederick Douglass Republican Movement, because Frederick Douglass was a Republican. And his conversations with Abraham Lincoln helped to shape much of what became attractive for blacks at that time to the Republican Party. K. Carl Smith said, when people get lost in the fog about being Republicans, say to them, do you respect the Constitution? And he walked down 3 other points, which are really the core fundamental rules. Respect the Constitution, all of it. Again, the social upward mobility, the wealth creation, and the limited but effective government. And those are the things that we really should be talking about. And once you talk about those things, and everyone will say yes.
That they do believe in that.
Exactly. There we are. The fog lifts, everyone becomes clear, you see the light bulbs go off. And people say, oh. So, and the other piece that K. Carl Smith brought to the table was that he emphasized that we didn't need a black Republican to talk to black people. We didn't need a Latina or a Latino to talk to other people about being Republicans. That we are in a mix, and that we are all equipped to go and talk to whomever we wish, whoever drops by, about the Republican message. And that was very different. And the 100 or so people who attended that event, they walked away with a very different, a very enlightened understanding of what their responsibilities are. You know, that they weren't going to wait for Robert to talk to someone who looks like me. They were going to come and talk to me about loving and defending the Constitution and all the other things that are defining points for the Republican Party.
Well, of course, this election year, for instance, all the candidates running for governor are none of them are people of color. Unlike past elections, Governor Patrick, President Obama. Does that kind of like take that out of the equation and help in terms of kind of, to get people to focus on the issues versus those kinds of factors such as the race, ethnicity?
I find it slightly easier, but the challenges are still there as far as getting people to look at something in a different light are still there. But obviously, not having someone of color, there's sort of that loyalty between the African American community and an African American governor, obviously, or an African American president.
Right. Especially when they're the first.
Right.
Yeah, it's tough to kind of.
That's obvious. Even in 2008, as a Republican, when Barack Obama was first elected, my brain was with the Republican Party, but my heart, was that was an historical achievement. So yes, the short answer is yes. Without that, without those gentlemen being there, it is a little bit easier. But again, the historical challenges of getting people to look at things in a new light, and that's why what Rachel talks about is so important. That's why actually showing up is so important, and doing that outreach and actually being there so people that can see you, meet you, get to look at you as if like you're one of their neighbors, which you are.
Is it helpful that looks like your standard bearer, and of course there's a primary election, will be Charlie Baker. Now, he is a little pasty face, there's no doubt about it, the poor guy, but does that make it easier for you
Well, I don't think it actually makes it easier, because we know what the numbers are and we know what we need to have in terms of winning. You know, everyone says we can get 1 million votes, but we need 1.2 million. And if you look at the Gomez campaign, as he was coming up the Republican South Shore, he was ahead by 22 points. He gets to Sharon Easton, and things become a little squishy. He hits Boston, and he's 22 points behind, and remained there. So it's a matter of communicating. It's a matter of getting the message out. It's a matter of very quickly making some bonds here in Boston, where we'll be able to really have a get out the vote effort. Right here, starting in places like Grove Hall, Mattapan, Dudley Station. That's going to make the big difference.
Well, and so you're realistic. It's tough going in city Boston,
But
for
if you-
any Republican
Right,
candidate.
but if you don't try, if you
Right.
don't make that first effort, you can't have the second effort. And then you can't have the third effort, because the momentum is never going to be there.
Well, I give you a lot of credit and for your courage.
He does the hard work. I don't.
For your courage, because some people don't believe it can happen.
Yeah.
And I would think, especially in neighborhoods where, and it's not to say it's just in neighborhoods of color, but any neighborhood where there's high unemployment rate, anybody offering economic opportunity would seem to be in the right position. But that doesn't always translate, and so
That's why you got to work hard. That's why you have to work hard.
has it been in terms of an experience for you, Robert, an eye-opening experience in terms of obviously you've been a Republican for a while, but
Yeah.
perhaps you haven't had to do this much proselytizing for some time, right?
It's definitely eye-opening, and whenever I feel like, that it's a major challenge, I think about a hero of mine, Ed Brooke, and the fact that he got elected as an African-American Republican in 1962 for Attorney General. That shows me it's possible.
Well, and Rachel, I know you've been, at this for a while too. You've been nice enough to come by in the program for various election specials, and Republicans haven't fared well here, but you don't seem to be any beaten down yet or any worse for wear.
Absolutely not. I'm up for the challenge. You have to be able to communicate the message. I've been telling my Republican colleagues, we have to engage, excite, and educate. That's what we have to do as grassroots advocates, carrying a message. That's what the Democrats do. We must carry our own message and make sure that it is clear and understandable to everyone that we communicate to. Nothing up here, right here, so that it's understandable.
Well, and I know we're still a couple of years out, but already people are talking about the presidential races. That there's also a message you want to carry to your colleagues in other states. As I said at the top of the show, at least part of the reason that they attribute Mitt Romney's loss was his failure to really reach out to all parts of the country, and didn't do particularly well with people of color. I think that's fair to say. Up against it, no doubt, but is that something that you think could resonate nationally?
I think so. Already they've started to put together teams to go into areas, establish identity and be available. Because one of the things that we're hoping will happen in Boston is that whether we win or not, we're going to establish constituency services and be available to show that, number one, we are in fact your neighbors. Two, we really do care. And we know how to deliver also. So we're not only reaching out, we're going to bond, we're going to be there when you need us. And that again starts that whole momentum that
You start somewhere and build on it. Robert, you ready to take this show on the road? Now, your political action committee, the urban prosperity, is that what that's geared towards?
That is the hope, and that is the plan, to take it nationally, take it on the road, absolutely. Because as Rachel said, the party does care. It does want to see everybody succeed, but it's an important, vital thing for the party to do in order for it to survive, the party itself. The Democrats, the demographics of our nation and our voting population demand that the party begin to actively and consistently compete for votes of color.
Well, we shall see. Coming up, of course, this is a very exciting election year. Joining me in this segment, Rachel Kemp, Republican State Committee person from the 2nd Suffolk District, and from the Political Action Committee, Urban Prosperity, Robert Fortes. I want to thank you both for coming in and joining me. You are brave. I knew that, though. I knew that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. You're watching Talking the Neighborhoods here on the Boston Neighborhood Network. We're here tonight and every Monday night at the same time. We'll be back next week. We're hoping to have more insight on the latest poll from the Suffolk University polling group. And till then, for the entire staff and crew here at BNN, I'm Joe Heisler. Thank you for watching. Have a pleasant evening.